To get started, thank you for the introduction. I am happy to be here. How many people in this room have a paper resume or a digital version of a paper resume? 90% of you? How many people have received a paper resume or an emailed resume in the last week, 2 weeks, month? Okay, good. I want to clear up one thing. A lot of people think about LinkedIn as a digital version of your resume. Right? And in a lot of ways it is, right? It's got your job experience, it has your skill sets, and it really is, it really is a very good interactive resume, if that's all it is. But if you stop there, I think you're missing out on a lot of what LinkedIn can provide to you and your business. And so, and I'll be honest, until a couple weeks ago, or maybe even a couple months ago, I probably really thought of LinkedIn as very much about Gavin. It's my resume. It's where you can see the people I know and the things I'm involved in and the clients I work with and the jobs I've had. But hopefully at the end of the day, you'll walk out of here with an understanding of LinkedIn's a lot bigger than that, and with some 2 to 3, maybe 4 real strategies that can actually help you really kind of do what this title is, which is how to win friends and influence customers with LinkedIn. So that's me. If you guys need my contact information, I'm gbaker@moxleycarmichael.com, which is one of the longest email addresses in the world. But at least it's not Alan Carmichael @moxleycarmichael.com, because it'd be longer. Although he is a great man. I'm also on Twitter at @GavinBaker. There is a hashtag for today if you're on Twitter, which is the # SMS12, which can be a great way to keep track of kind of the conversations that are happening. We are not going to be doing any live tweeting, so I'm not going to be responding to any questions that you may have via Twitter. But if you do ask some, I can go back later and find them. So I'd be happy for you guys to do that. Before we dive into a bit, I do want to talk about one thing. Some of you are probably familiar with Moxley Carmichael. We've had a crazy week with Extreme Home Makeover. I don't know if you guys have you all heard about that. Okay. Does everyone know that the kind of the Move That bus has been delayed until tomorrow? Okay. So if you were planning on going, don't. It's tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So if you want to be a spectator, you have to be there by 8. And I think it's one of those things planned to be there from 8 to, I don't know what the end time is, but it's not 10:05. So long, planned for a long day. But what a neat thing that's been here in town. And so Moxley Carmichael has been very fortunate to be really involved. And so, but I do want to get that out of the way. If you have questions about that, I can take those at the end too. But our basic format's going to be me talking. You guys can ask questions as I'm talking if you like. But there will be time at the end to make sure we get your questions answered. All right? So that's me, Director of Digital Media. These are some of the clients that Moxley Carmichael has. So we think we've got some of the best clients in Knoxville. Certainly recognize a number of names up there. And so anyway, Pilot, PetSafe, Covenant Health, US Cellular, New Sentinel, Cocoa Fit Club's a new one, Cherokee Distributing. Anyway, great clients. And we're primarily a PR firm. Let's talk about LinkedIn. Kind of little trivia. Does anyone know what this picture is from? It's okay if you don't. No one does. This is a screenshot of the LinkedIn Jobs Forum that President Barack Obama held at LinkedIn's headquarters. So President Obama is like right here in the photo. So I guess I could be him in this context. And the reason I chose this photo is because LinkedIn is quickly becoming a very important piece of jobs, right? Of America, how people talk about what they do in terms of how they make money, right? And so, but I want to define what LinkedIn is. So this is from Wikipedia. LinkedIn is an online networking community of business people. This next one is from just a website that's social media related. LinkedIn is a business-oriented social networking site. And then this is what I wrote. LinkedIn is social networking for professionals. And I really think it's about being professionals. It's not necessarily about being a business person. It's not even necessarily being about business oriented, although I think it has those characteristics. Because honestly, you could use Twitter and Facebook in a business oriented sense, and it would be just as successful as LinkedIn if you chose to kind of do those strategies. So it's for professionals. So that's good. The goal of today is this is about being a professional online. So first things first. This is going to kind of be, if we use a college, a 200 level class, right? So this is not about how to get your LinkedIn profile set up. I'm assuming that all of you in here know how to get to LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com. If you don't, And you already have your profile updated. You probably already have connections. You've got a lot of the things done that they would walk you through. If not, here are kind of what they are. Make sure you complete your profile, right? And keep it updated. So add a photo, add your jobs, add maybe your education. Kind of connect with some people. Step one. Step two, connect with your clients, your vendors, and your friends, right? It's kind of interesting to me how few people remember to do clients, vendors, right? You probably do your address book import, it grabs it, and you're good to go. But you may not think, oh, well, we signed a new vendor, why didn't I connect with them? Or I've got this new client that I've actually had on board for 6 months, but we're not friends on LinkedIn or connected on LinkedIn, maybe we should do that. So start there. And then lastly, join alumni, business association, industry groups. So represented in this room, there's a Knoxville chamber group. So if you're a chamber member, that's probably a good group to maybe join, get to meet some people. There's an Introduction Knoxville group that you can join. There are, hi Sandy. There are numbers of other groups. There's Social Media Club Knoxville. There's, you name it, there's a group on there for what you do most likely. So join that group and get involved. Okay, so that is the end of LinkedIn 101. We are now on to how to win friends and influence clients. So this is a bunch of books, all different covers of how to win friends and influence people. Most likely, some of you have read, I bet no one has read a book that looks like this in this room. But if you have, kudos for being here today. But how many people have read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie? Okay, wow. That's actually a lot less than I would have thought. Okay, I would highly recommend reading this book. You're going to get a pretty strong flavoring of it today, but it's a book that just has a lot of good practical wisdom in it as it relates to doing business. And it's written in a little bit of a tone, just FYI, that is not current. So it's going to come across as a little, what's the right word? How would it come across? A little antiquated? Perfect. That's great. But just know that. So a lot of people. So number one, this is actually my favorite cover, by the way, of all of them. And it says this is the most popular work of nonfiction of our time, right? We don't talk like that anymore, but maybe we should. So the key to this book is this quote: "The deepest urge in human nature is the desire to be important." So I'll say it again. The deepest urge in human nature is the desire to be important, right? And so the premise of How to Win Friends and Influence People is, how do you make people feel important? And if you make people feel important, everything that you want to accomplish will happen. I'll put that in quotation marks because I can't guarantee that. But for the most part, that's the general rule. And so everything I'm going to talk about today is kind of going to come back to this central point. How do you make people feel important? How do you use LinkedIn to make clients, vendors, customers, and potential customers feel important? Because at the end of the day, LinkedIn is a site, and you're here to learn about LinkedIn, right? So I'm not going to disparage that. But in 10 years, LinkedIn may not matter, right? It probably won't matter. Or it may not matter in the way it does today. And so I would rather you leave with some tools of how do I use a site like LinkedIn in ways to build my business and build my customer base. So number one, LinkedIn isn't about you. So I don't know that LinkedIn quite gets this, to be honest, because when you log into LinkedIn, what do you get? You get a stream of your friends, but then it's like, update your status. Then you have your profile. Like the number one overarching thing about LinkedIn is your profile, where you've got your connections and your jobs and your recommendations and your answers. And they use the word "you" a lot. But ultimately, if we're going to use LinkedIn in the way that it probably can be used best, it's not going to be about things that you're doing on LinkedIn in terms of touting your own abilities, your own accomplishments. It's going to be about using LinkedIn to go back to that quote to help people feel important, to make them feel important, and the desire to feel important. So number one, so this is a profile, right? So if you logged into LinkedIn and you went to my profile, this is what you would see, right? So it's got my photo, it's got the most recent tweet I have, it's got my current role, my past role, my college, recommendations, it's got all of these things. So that makes it seem like, hey, this is very much about Gavin. But what I want you guys to walk away with today is, how do I utilize all these things about other people ultimately to make them feel really important. And really not feel important, but to be important, right? So there's a difference there. It's not just about feeling important, it's about them actually being important to you and building that relationship. So we'll keep going. We're going to walk through that. This is going to get a little repetitive, but I'll move as fast as I can. So sections of LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has an incredible amount of information on it, right? So there's your profile page, which we just looked at. There is your contacts or your connections. They're two different things. So you can actually upload contacts to LinkedIn that are not on LinkedIn yet, and then it'll let you know when they get on LinkedIn. So if you sync your address book, it may add 50 people that don't have a contact. Well, once they join, it'll say, hey, this person joined. You've got groups, which we talked about a little bit. You have jobs. So just a little side note, if you are job seeking, there are a lot of great people who use LinkedIn for jobs. Like most of you have gotten probably a message from a recruiter at one point in time that said, hey, got this awesome opportunity for you, call now kind of a thing. Another little tidbit is if you are looking to leave jobs, number one, don't raise your hand. Number two, don't all of a sudden update your profile, right? So if you're friends with your boss on LinkedIn and you haven't touched LinkedIn in 10 months, and all of a sudden it's like you added 75 connections, you have 5 new recommendations, 10 new roles, and all these skills, it's probably a little bit like, what's going on here? So that's a call for continual updating because it will happen, right? And whether or not they notice it or not, you still don't want that to happen. Messages, right? So you can talk with people on LinkedIn via messaging. I don't really like it, but you can do it. You can invite people, so you get invitations. I am habitually really bad at invitations. So there are people in this room who have an outstanding LinkedIn invitation to me that I have not accepted. And I apologize. I am sorry. I'm not really good at it. The other thing about it too is I care for my LinkedIn connections to be real connections, right? So I want them to be people that I feel like these are people that I know. So there are a number of people in this room that are connections already. And that's because I know you, you know me. I have no problem recommending you. I have no problem with someone saying, I know this person. And I want to be able to use LinkedIn that way. That's not how everyone wants to use it, but I want it to be valid. So when it says there's this person that you want to know, and then this person that is you, and in the middle there's Gavin, I want it to be like, you can call Gavin, and I could say, oh yeah, I know Josh, or I know John, or I know Jeremy, or whoever. And I'd be happy to make a connection for you. Not, well, you know what, I was at this thing once, and they gave me their card, and we posted, I want it to be strong. So that's personal. You do it however you want. There's also the status update. So kind of similar to the Facebook status update, that little box at the beginning. There's answers, there's recommendations, there's companies. We are not going to talk about all these things today. Collective sigh of relief, and we'll move on. There's also applications, which is like bringing your blog in or your trips or whatever. But what we are going to talk about is 3 fundamental techniques that are defined inside of how to win friends and influence people and how that relates to LinkedIn. So number 1, fundamental techniques in handling people, which again, antiquated technology, we probably wouldn't say how to handle people. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Right? And this is straight out of the book. I didn't write any of this. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Give honest and sincere appreciation and arouse in the other person an eager want. So those are his 3 tenets. So outside of make the person feel important or them to be important, are these 3 things. And so we're going to come back to this again and again. How do you use the different pieces of LinkedIn to accomplish these 3 goals? So number 1, going back to this, right? The desire to be important. You're going to see this about 10 more times. You should be able to walk out of here, this is seared in your brain. That's the goal. So sections of LinkedIn that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about groups. We're going to talk about the status update, answers, and recommendations. Those are the 4 areas that we're going to focus on today. So groups. So is everyone who is on LinkedIn here, are they members of a couple groups? Okay, good, so we understand a basic thing there. So this is a screenshot of the groups I'm involved in, right? So groups play a role for a variety of reasons. Number 1, they're kind of like, for lack of a term, like little merit badges, or they're things that show where you're involved. So like I'm a member of, these are actually really hard to read. I'm a member of a group called Design Thinking, and Next Billion, and Nucleus Knoxville, and Messiah College Alumni, which is where I went to school, and Atlanta Startups, and Introduction Knoxville, and the Chamber. And so those are groups I'm involved in, right? So if you were to come to my page, I want you to say, oh, these are things that Gavin has interest in. And then on top of that, they're not just about having interest, they're about having dialogue inside of those if you desire to. And this is a great spot. So this is a screenshot of the social media marketing LinkedIn group, which is very, very active. Which really isn't that surprising, but it's very active. And so this is a rotating thing about things that have been shared, most popular discussion. So post your Facebook business page here, and it keeps going. There's all this information inside of it. So what can you do with the group, right? So the Chamber actually has a very active LinkedIn group where there are people that are active, they're asking questions. A lot of the groups I'm in are not active, right? That's kind of the beast, nature of the beast. Sometimes they're active, sometimes they're not. The Chambers is, and so is this one. And so what you can do is you can join one of these groups and then take a step back and say, okay, how as a business person can I do these things? Can I follow these rules? Can I not criticize and complain, right? So sometimes in an industry group, you may be prone to just be negative, right? You're going to complain about how something's happening or the changes that are being made here. So you can be the outlier and be the positive one. It doesn't mean to say you don't go with the flow, but maybe it's just not being negative, right? Maybe it's finding ways to give people appreciation inside that group. And I'm going to come back to this. So groups, restrict negative commentary, right? We as people particularly in social media, because we feel like it doesn't matter, we get negative, right? We complain about something, whether it's the power being out or the service at your table not being correct or whatever it is. And those can be very appropriate things. I'm not saying not to do that. But when you think about it from a business aspect, think about LinkedIn, do you want to be known as a negative business person, right? If people, all they saw was your LinkedIn, would you want to walk away and say, yeah, Gavin's just really cynical about life? Probably not, because would you want to work with me if all I was cynical? Probably not. You want to work with people that are forward-thinking and positive. You know, even if no one would articulate that, that still is true. That's what they want. You can give honest and appreciative feedback inside those groups. So that means when you engage, you don't just go there to say, let me share my opinion. You go there to say, hey, Gerald had this really good point here. Here's another one, right? So it's only 5 more words, right? But who feels really appreciated that point? Gerald probably does, right? Because you're in an industry group and someone inside your industry is saying, hey, they did a good job here. And that may be all the comment you have is say, you know what? I was going to write this exact same thing, but Tim wrote this other and it's great. Here's a link to it, right? So you're just taking a little bit of time to share some of those other things that are happening around you. So it stops being so much about you and what you're doing and improving your point, and it starts being about other people. Share links from your clients and customers when appropriate, right? So this is not an approval. Go to LinkedIn and take everything a client produces and share it, right? Because that will not win you friends at all. That will win you frustration. But if you're in a group where you're participating, this is specifically groups. If you're in a group, if a client has done something or a customer has done something that is appropriate, share it. Share and say, hey, my client, Pilot Flying J, did this thing and it went really well, right? Or this person at this company did this thing and it went really well. And it's going to get you, of course, some clout because you knew that thing. But additionally, once your client sees that or your customer sees that or your friend sees that, they're going to feel like, wow, they care about me more than they care about themselves. I want to work with somebody like that. And share client success stories, right? So we've all been involved in a scenario, right, where someone takes that moment of glory from you, right? So someone takes that idea that you pitched in the meeting and spins it as their own. Or they share that idea that maybe you had mentioned in meetings past or another idea and they cut you out of it. So we were doing this thing and this happens. So, and I think we're all clients, we're all vendors, we're all a mixture of things in that room. So make sure that you're not doing that to your own people that pay you, right? So at the end of the day, customers and clients pay you money. So certainly don't be negative about them, but 2, don't steal from them if there is glory to be given to them. And just make sure you do that. So I think it's easier to do when you think about it from a you perspective, but at the end of this, hopefully you'll be walking away with, this isn't about me, this is about my clients or customers. So we'll go through sections. So that was groups. And I think groups are a very underrated space, but if you jump in there, I think you'll find some value. But pick 1 or 2 because they add up. Most of you that are on there, you probably get 20,000 emails a day from group members updating about things. Pick one. So maybe it's the chamber, start there. Or maybe it's Social Media Club Knoxville or wherever, but engage. Number 2, the status update. That's where we're gonna go next. So the status update is this little box. So this is when I log into LinkedIn, this is what I see, right? So I see this immediate thing right there that I can share an update about. And then I see other updates, right? So I see Brooke Thurman is now connected to all these other people. Eve Strands is connected to all these other people. So you see this right here. And so what we're going to talk about is these updates that you share there show up here, right? As you do different things around the site, they're going to show up. So when you make a comment in a group, it's also going to show up here. And so what we want to do is focus on using that box to basically share really good information. So like, for example, I connect my Twitter to LinkedIn. I don't know that I would recommend that for everybody, but for me, I also follow those 3 rules. I'm not negative. Like my goal on Twitter is never to be negative. And so I don't worry about me being negative showing up on LinkedIn. But some people are negative. Some people by nature use Twitter as a way to scream at companies and people who aren't doing what they want them to do at that period of time. And that's okay. Just think about where else it's going to be shown. I also have a friend who does not use Facebook or Twitter, barely uses email, but has a LinkedIn account. And so he gets updates from me via LinkedIn that he wouldn't get otherwise. And I would never share them with him, but occasionally he'll call me and say, hey, I saw this thing. Can you tell me more about it, right? So it works as a way long term. But what I want to talk about is how do you use these techniques, right? Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Give honest and sincere appreciation. Arouse the other person an eager want. How do you implement these into your status messages? With ultimately the goal being helping people with the desire to be important. So status, you want to restrict that negative. We've already gone there, right? Don't be negative, right? So if you walk away with one thing, don't be negative. It's not going to get you where you want to go. I promise you. Number 2, give that feedback in that status update. So something you could maybe say would be on LinkedIn. Was at a presentation today with Gavin Baker, and it was phenomenal. I learned these 7 things, right? I'm just kidding. You don't need to do that. But we have so many opportunities during our day to share things that happen that are positive with people around us. And I think the key is it's not doing it just to do it. It's doing it because you mean it, right? So if you walked away from today and you didn't really learn anything, number 1, I'm sorry. And number 2, maybe you should share that. Privately preferred, but if you really appreciated the fact that you learned 6 things today or 2 things, then you should share that. Or if you went to Bliss and the person who helped you was really helpful, then saying, I was at Bliss today and this person who helped me did a great job and I really appreciate that. Culturing that inside of you will then turn it from when you're at the office and someone you work with does something that is out of the ordinary for you, your immediate thought will be, how can I tell somebody else about this, right? You may already do it one-on-one, but how do I tell 20 people about this to say, you know what, they did this thing and it was just super nice and caring that they shot me a text message about this thing, or that they, in our office, one of the things I'm really bad at, we have a sign-in, sign-out sheet to keep track of everybody. I rarely do it. I'm just really bad at it. So people, which I know is a bad thing to be bad at, but it's true. So, even if it's something as simple as Amy, who's our receptionist. Amy, thank you for always signing me in out so that people don't call me and say, where are you? It's like, oh, I've been here. I've been at the chamber for an hour and a half. Well, we didn't know that. So little things like that can make them appreciated and to feel important. Again, you can share those links. And really the status area is probably a better spot than the groups area because you can update that status a lot more often with these things as it relates to links of appreciation. So like Pilot just launched a new iPhone or a new Android app. Sharing that and saying our client Pilot just launched this brand new Android app and it's awesome. And maybe it's not a client. Maybe it's just somebody in town that you think is really neat. And so say you've been an avid Prestige Cleaners client. And you're really, really proud of the fact that Eddie Manis is now part of the mayoral administration. Well, maybe it's just sharing that. Because honestly, the goal isn't necessarily that they may never know at the end of the day that you shared that information. But you're sharing it and people are seeing that and they're realizing it. You want to share client success stories. I would highly recommend that, finding these spots to highlight what clients are doing. And maybe it's not even because it's inside your work, right? So, there's a number of Claris guys here today. Maybe Claris, really transition someone, they migrate them to a brand new system, it's awesome. Well, 90% of the people, no offense guys, don't care about the migration, right? They don't. They do not care. But what they might care about is that fact that this new client is actually now a lot better at what they do because of that. And so why not share that story? Hey, our client is now, new call center times are down 30% because they, not even because of our computers, but because they're just doing a lot better job in serving customers, and we're happy to be serving them in that way. And there's a million ways. I don't know all your businesses. Every business is different. But how can you think about these things to do it and put a system in place, right? So maybe it's doing it once a day. So you say, I want to update LinkedIn, whether it's in a group or it's a status update, with something that is positive about somebody or something every day. I think that'd be a good goal. I don't do that today, right? So this is me saying, I need that goal too. But how do you do that? How do you do that? And it will turn LinkedIn into this place that isn't just your digital resume, right? It'll turn it into this place that is actually starting to, you'll probably get some engagement. People will probably respond. And they may not respond on LinkedIn, but they might send you an email and said, hey, saw your note, really appreciate that. Those are really kind words. So another section here. Answers. Actually, I think we're going to recommendations. Recommendations. Recommendations on LinkedIn, in my opinion, are I think they're really powerful, but they're really misused. So, like, I have a couple of recommendations. I've never written a recommendation on LinkedIn because what I see is someone writes me a recommendation and then they ask me for a recommendation, right? So it's very quid pro quo, and I don't think that that's what that's supposed to do, right? I think it's supposed to be an outlet where it's a real recommendation. It's a real thing. And so because of that, I've kind of stayed away from them. But I'm going to show some examples later, but I really do think it's a powerful way. And I was thinking about this as I was building this presentation. When I have a recommendation from a guy named Olivier Blanchard, who is a phenomenal social media and marketing expert in Greenville, South Carolina. Phenomenal. And he wrote me this amazingly, and he and I are friends, and he wrote me this unsolicited recommendation on LinkedIn. And I remember getting it and how touched I was. Just the fact that this person that I knew, who's a friend of mine, wrote this thing that basically just said, Gavin is awesome at what he does, and you're dumb if you don't talk to him about it, right? Right, and he wrote it. I'm not saying that's what he wrote. But to think about the power of that thing and how you can use that in your own business. My personal goal after walking through this is, how can I find a recommendation to write a week, right? Or maybe it's from different groups. So I'm involved in Nucleus Knoxville and YPK and very involved in my church and very involved in lots of other things here in town. I can find one person from each of those groups throughout the year to write a recommendation about, and you can too. And I don't think what you're going to find is that you'll get a new one, and that's not the goal. Your goal isn't to all of a sudden you write 12 recommendations and you have 12, right? Because that's going to look weird, number one, and number two, your goal should be these people in my life that are customers or clients, or friends, they do good work in their areas where they're doing it, and I want to highlight that. I want to say they are doing an awesome job in this area. And so thinking about it from that perspective, which I realize is weird, right? We don't tend to talk about business in this kind of format very often. It's very much just about what can I get out of this? And really this isn't about what can you get out of it. It's about what you can give using LinkedIn as a way to build your business, right? Because most people, like, I'm not from Knoxville, and I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of people in the short time I've been here. And I think Knoxville is a great place. And I'm not planning on leaving, right? So my business connections are long term, right? It's not about making money tomorrow. It's about making money in the next 5 years. It's about making those connections, those clients that will build your business as you grow. And so these are recommendations. This is the one. So this is the one from Olivia. And I won't read all of it. I'll read the first part because I think it's funny. Is a brilliant marketing strategist and one of the rare few social media managers. Blah, 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 blah. Right? Now, to be honest, I don't actually think all of this is true. Like, this is a very, very fluffed up. But most people that read that, well, I guess you guys all know that now, but most people that read that won't know that. Or this is another one from, and this is one actually. So before I was at Moxie Carmichael, I was at a company called Ruby Tuesday. Before I was at Ruby Tuesday, I was at a company called Abunga.com. And when I was at Abunga, this guy, Ryan Nash, is the producer at the the digital group we worked with out of California. And so he wrote this because he was leaving his job, right? So he said, Gavin is one of the greatest of great clients, right? How real does that sound? Greatest of great clients. He's the pinnacle of my career. Anyway, he's always provided strong direction without micromanaging, so all these things. Well, he did this because after he wrote this, I received a LinkedIn message. Hey, Gavin, I'm actually leaving Fabric and would love a recommendation or any help that you can provide me, right? So he wrote this because he wanted something from me. And most people don't know that, but I didn't write him a recommendation, right? I think Ryan's a great guy. I really do. He was actually very easy to work with. He always handled our requests and our deadlines incredibly well. But at the end of the day, the way he went about it soured the whole experience. Versus Olivier, I did nothing. Or Noah Glass, who runs another company. Noah Glass runs a company that wanted business from Ruby Tuesday, right? So LinkedIn recommendations aren't everything they always look like. And I think all of you are very aware of that. Yeah, question?
One thing to remember about recommendations, in some industries, recommendations aren't allowed. In the investments industry,
sure.
The SEC says we're not allowed to receive testimonials. And recommendations equal testimonials, so we can't give those.
Okay. Did you ever hear that?
People say we can't.
So he said in the financial industry, you cannot receive recommendations because you can't receive testimonials. I have no idea how to handle that if you were in that industry. I guess if you get one, delete it. I don't know. Yeah, so delete it. So that's unfortunate. So if you're in the financial industry, do not go this route. Maybe give recommendations. Maybe you're in a perfect scenario, right? You can give recommendations but never receive them. So anyway, there are probably other industries that you can't do that in. I'm not an expert on all industries, but in my industry, I can clearly get them. And so I don't have that many, but I have some. So anyway, so it goes both ways. But I really would encourage you to do it because these two didn't really matter to me because I knew they were ulterior motives. But the top one actually really impacted me. And so you think about that aspect of writing a handwritten note, which doesn't happen very much. In some ways, this is very similar to that, right? But it's public. And so take advantage of that opportunity. Here's another one. So this is a recommendation from my friend Adam. And he's got two, one from an insurance company here in San Francisco for insurance, and then one for Claris Networks, which is just about, they're short and they're sweet. They don't have to be long. And I want to share them because they don't, they may not have to be about a specific thing. The top one just says, I've known him for a long time and he always does business with integrity, right? So is that something that you want to be known about you? Certainly, right? It doesn't have to be like, I did this specific project with him and it went, it achieved an ROI of 376% and was 2 months under budget, or 2 months under whatever. So, like, it doesn't have to be businessy. It can just be, hey, I really like this guy and he always does good stuff. This is another one. This is Lindsay Kaler, right? Everyone knows Lindsay Kaler's a rock star. If you don't know Lindsay Kaler, she's a rock star. She's a social media manager for Pilot. And as you can tell, these are all recommendations that she has. But what I wanted to show is that, sorry, Sandy. Sandy wrote Lindsay a recommendation up here because of Lindsay's work with Introduction Knoxville. Deneen Katani wrote Lindsay a recommendation because of the work she actually did with the KAMA. This one is actually with it's because of her work on the 91, the WOT board, right? So all of Lindsay's recommendations are not necessarily tied to her business. They're tied to her groups that are really just about where she gives in the community. And so it doesn't have to be business focused. And everyone here probably has at least 1 or 2 groups they're involved in, right? That you could find somebody from and say, hey, you do a great job at our meeting, and I appreciate that about you, right? You always show up on time. I've got a guy in mind from our nucleus board who always asks really good questions, right? So I could write that note on here and say, XYZ, you always asks the most piercing questions and gets us back on track when we are talking about things that are not related to the point of the meeting. I'd probably write it better than that, but that was really just off the cuff. So anyway, there's a lot of use for recommendations so take a big step back and say, this isn't just about the business I'm in today. Where else am I involved? Where else can I find these people that I'm willing to do things with? And this is, I say this not just to you, I say it to me, right? I'm involved in a lot of things. I'm just fortunate to get kind of around. But I have not written a recommendation for anybody, but I could. I could write a recommendation for probably half the people in this room because of the things we've done together. And so I kind of almost had that as my own charge, to say, how do I walk away from this and do a better job and utilize this tool? And not in a way that all of a sudden I do 20 this week and all of a sudden everyone on LinkedIn's like, why in the world is Gavin writing all these recommendations? But so that it becomes a long-term piece of my toolkit in terms of really just growing business. So going back to this, we haven't talked about this in a second. I know you guys have missed them. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. And I think that's actually a key point to recommendation is don't write your recommendation as a backhanded compliment, right? Which is easy to do. So I have a friend from Pennsylvania, from PA, and he loves kind of these kind of compliments. And so it's like his favorite phrase is, "Oh, you can buy your suits off the rack? That's so great. I have to get all mine custom fitted," right? Don't write it like that, right? You could write a recommendation that's like, "Yeah, he's just a great guy," but it's like, make sure it's actually truthful and honest. And at the end of the day, it doesn't make the person say, "Well, wait a second. Is this about you or is it about me?" And it's easy to do. But so as you're writing those recommendations, make them honest. Most people aren't going to write a negative recommendation because I don't even know if that's possible. That would probably make the world blow up. But even just be careful to not even bring in like these other things about their company or what they're doing, but make it about them. Sincere appreciation. You find that reason that you really want to write that recommendation and do it. And then that one doesn't apply to recommendations. So again, right, the ultimate goal here we're talking about today is the desire to be important. And we feel important when other people make us important. And so when I share, so if I wrote a recommendation on LinkedIn, if you don't use LinkedIn, you probably wouldn't care. But if you use LinkedIn, you might think, that's really neat. I got this email from someone who I respect, or at least is a friend of mine, and they said these nice things about me. That makes me feel good, right? That makes my day go better. And ultimately, they think positively towards me, right? But the end goal isn't for them to think positively towards me. It's to make sure that they're feeling like, hey, I matter in this world. So we already talked through these, but identify customers and clients to recommend. Identify them, like find them, write them down, right? So don't just think, okay, I could do this, but like maybe put on your calendar. Today I'm going to write a recommendation for someone who works in my company. And then I'm going to write a recommendation for someone I used to work with. And then it's someone who's on a board I'm in. Or then it's for, I think you have to be a connection on LinkedIn to write a recommendation. But most of you probably have connections with people that are different. And you could probably write a recommendation for someone you don't know incredibly well, but maybe it's just more of appreciation kind of thing. So maybe you are, I don't even know if Eddie Manis is on LinkedIn. He probably isn't. But if he was, you could say, hey, really appreciate his business ethics and leadership in the community, even though you don't really know him. Maybe actually some of you probably do, but I don't. So I could write that. Not for business. Look to boards, community groups. Find those people around you that are important. So like for years, I coached lacrosse for 3 years at Farragut High School. And I met some great connections in that time. I could have recommendations on my LinkedIn about the time I coached at Farragut, right? If they wanted to write them. It wouldn't really be weird. You might think of it as weird, but it's like, at the end of the day, it's just me meeting people, right? And knowing people. And they could write something we were very successful while we were there. So they could write, and I have some very touching stories from my time there. So the parents whose kids were impacted by our time could easily write something and say, Gavin spent countless hours with my son to help him understand the meaning of sports and how it's not just about winning, but it's about character, right? They could write that. They didn't, but they could. And, well, they wrote it, but just not on LinkedIn, like I have. But the point would be, they could write those kinds of things, and you could too, right? So if you've got kids and there's coaches, it may not be that they could just be a person who is on LinkedIn who is probably never really going to use it, but those recommendations might mean something to them that they've never gotten before. So other sections. Answers. Answers has been around for a long time, and I think Answers is important. And so what Answers is it's kind of a gigantic Q&A that is public, for lack of a better way of thinking about it. So this is what if you log into Answers, which is actually under More up top, you would be hearing. It's got Ask a Question, and then for me it says these are answers categories that Gavin might be good at, right? So it would say it for you too. Starting up, e-commerce, web development. I'm not a web developer, so please don't ask me any questions about web development, but I could answer questions about the first two. And so what you've got down here is you've got some different questions, right? Are you an entrepreneur or small business owner with service-based brick and mortar and/or online retail business who has used social media to increase your bottom line? And there are 2 answers. So it says who asked it, when it was asked, what category, and your connection, right? So April Parcher is a secondary connection of mine. I have no idea who April Parcher is. But if I were to click it, I would be taken to this, right? So here's your question right there. And then from there, there are a couple of things you can do with it. You can answer it, number one, if you wanted to answer it. But if you don't want to answer it, I would highly recommend you suggest an expert, right? So in your industry, maybe you can't always answer every question, right? There's lots of questions about web development I couldn't answer. Yeah, tons actually, most, 90%. But I might be able to say, hey, this person I've worked with here could really answer this question about PHP or APIs or whatever. Another thing you can do to help people is you can share it, right? So you can say, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to share this with people on Facebook or Twitter or maybe on my blog to kind of add some more awareness around this question. That does 2 things. Number one, April might reach out to you and say, hey, thanks for doing that. I appreciate your answer. Are you helping me? What also might happen is, these are hard to see here, but William Cooper is the CEO and marketing guru and Facebook expert. Sorry, I didn't mean to read that. That's funny. If someone refers themselves as marketing guru, Facebook expert with 800,000 fans, or 8 million fans, I can't read that. You shouldn't talk to them, probably. Because most people that are good at what they do don't say that they're really good at what they do publicly, right? They might say it in private to friends, but they're not going to say, I'm really the best person at this thing. And so when you put it here, that probably means, he's got a lot of questions, I'll be honest. He's answered 64 questions. So he probably actually knows something, but I would just be careful. And that applies across the board, yeah.
Gavin, what's
the
proper etiquette on, I know response time on Twitter and Facebook,
yeah.
most instantaneous, but what about in the inbox, messages?
Oh, sure.
What's proper?
Let me get to that at the end if that's okay. But his question's about the inbox, and we'll get back to that. So anyway, going back to the answers, do something with this, right? For a long time, I had a personal branding goal of answering a LinkedIn question a week. I don't do that any longer. I probably did it for a couple weeks, if that. Yeah, I tried, right? But the thing about answering questions on LinkedIn is, number one, it shows up in your feed. So if you answer that question, it says, if I answered a question, if I were to answer this one, it would say Gavin Baker answered this question in your feed, right? So as you talk about business connections, well, who do you want to know in your world that you're answering questions about a topic someone who pays you might be interested in? Your clients, or your potential clients, or your customers. And so, it's important to do those kinds of things formally or with procedure. Because they also show up on your profile. So it could say, Gavin's answered 75 questions about marketing, small business, and startups, right? So all of a sudden, someone who doesn't know me can look at that and say, huh, that's interesting, he's answered all those questions. Or maybe I'm answering questions about, web development or HR or whatever. That would look weird if I was, because I don't really have answers there. But the point is, you've got these resources at your hand. And as a company, you might even want to say, take a step back and say, what if we as a company chose to answer questions here for a month? We did it as a trial, right? So we take every employee and say, you have to answer one question a week here. Think about the impact that could have, and let's see what happens. It could be huge. The other thing you can do is you can just bring awareness to questions, which I was talking about with sharing. So say someone I was friends with had a really good answer. Well, maybe I want people to know that. I could say, so let's say it was Jeremy instead of William T. Cooper. Say Jeremy is the marketing guru and Facebook expert. No, thank me later. Yep. I could maybe share this answer and just say, hey, great question here, great answer, right? I'm just bringing attention to this thing here. And so, yes, it takes investment of time without a doubt. I know we all have not enough time in our day. So I don't expect you to take everything we've talked about today and go do it. But I want to just open up some opportunities for you to say, well, maybe I don't ever want to write recommendations because I can't receive them. But I could go here and say, these are great financial answers. Or maybe you work with a certain type of client more than others. And so maybe they're all small business owners. You could say, lots of great questions here by these small business owners. And become that kind of that value add. So going back to this, don't criticize, condemn, or complain, which is hard to do in an answer, but you could do. Give honest and sincere appreciation, which ties to the aspect of sharing that movement forward. So we already talked about this. Share it with your networks. Give public or private congratulations to the people who wrote the answer. So 40 Under 40 just came out last week or 2 weeks ago. How many people here, and this is more of a rhetorical question, or it is rhetorical, not more of one. How many people wrote the 40 Under 40 members that you know and said congratulations, right? A couple, right? And that's great to do. Same kind of thing here, right? Someone answers a question, someone answers a big question, why not go to them and say, hey, saw your answer, this was great. Appreciate you sharing, taking time to share that, right? Acknowledging the fact that it takes time to do these things, but you're helping move an industry or a group forward. Share the answer in a LinkedIn group, right? So maybe people didn't see it, so you can come back and share it. At the end of the day, LinkedIn's a business tool, right? So the goal of LinkedIn isn't to showcase how many people you know, or to see pictures of your friends, or to even give minute-by-minute updates of what you're doing, right? At the end of the day, LinkedIn is a business tool. It's probably step one as a digital resume, and step two as a way to kind of display your connections. And so you want to use it to increase your awareness of what things that are happening around you. So think of it that way. How can I help the things that I'm involved in get more awareness? I was reading I know a couple people in this room probably have read Entre Leadership by Dave Ramsey, which is a really interesting book. And one of the things that's resonated with me this week is he says, if you as a leader have it in your power to do something to help someone and don't, you are not a leader, right? So if you can financially provide or give time or effort or a connection and you don't do it, who really are you at your core? And so I think at the end of the day, this is where LinkedIn plays a big role in, is if I can make a connection to somebody on LinkedIn, if I can make a recommendation, if I can do these things that might help them in their business, in their career, but will certainly at least help them in feeling good about who they are as a person and appreciated, why aren't we doing that? And same question as me, why am I not doing it? And then lastly, not lastly, there's one more. It opens up new connections to engage with your customers. You have these opportunities to see new options. So if you're always engaging with a customer on LinkedIn, they're going to recognize it. They may not recognize it day one, but they'll recognize it a couple weeks out if you're always responding to things, if you're always sharing things about them. They're going to see it. In the same way, if you only ever use LinkedIn when you have a prospect and you're trying to get their attention, they will also be aware of that. And so I would not recommend that either. But it can be a good way to get in front of somebody. Just don't always cycle through. These are the 10 clients I'm trying to get in front of, so I'm always sharing information about them. Then they get in the fold. I'm like, great, thanks for being a client. Now I'm on to the next ones. And leverage it, and it can be leveraged to extend the appreciation of your customers. At the end of the day, customers are what enable all of us to have jobs. Whether we work in a nonprofit or a government or I guess all businesses should be for-profit at some level, but a for-profit business, at the end of the day, someone pays money for a product or service that we provide that then allows us to have a job. And so think of LinkedIn as a way to say thank you to those people. And I think what you'll find is that your business will grow, and you'll use LinkedIn in a way that most people are not using it. And even, like I said, I'm not saying I do this perfectly, right? So you could easily go to my LinkedIn and say, everything Gavin just told me, he's not doing well. And I would agree. Because some of this is just stuff that has been formed as I've been walking through this. But one of my goals for Monday morning in our staff meeting is to say, how can we use LinkedIn more effectively at Moxie Carmichael? Step one, are all our account executives connections with our clients? If they're not, why not? Okay, so that's step one. Step two is, who can we recommend, right? Moxie Carmichael, we write a lot, thousands of words a day. I have no idea how much it is because I don't write. You wouldn't want me to write for you, but the people that know how to write do a great job at it, and they write a lot. So how can we write sincere, appreciative feedback for our clients every day, whether it's an email or it's public? But how can we take these principles of making people important and know that they're important, right? We've probably all been a client of a business who doesn't treat us like we think we should be treated, right? So what do we do when that happens? We take our business elsewhere. Even if the service is fine, right? Even if the product works the way it's supposed to work, at some point you may walk away because you don't feel appreciated anymore. And so think of LinkedIn as a way to show appreciation to people. And lastly, this is my favorite slide, so I'm going to show it. I think all of you are on board because you're here. If you dislike change, like if you don't want to change what you do as it relates to business development or customer engagement, you're going to dislike irrelevance even more, right? So LinkedIn isn't going to be the cure to your business failure or success, but technology and learning how to communicate it probably could be. And so LinkedIn is just one piece of that puzzle.